Hey, I'm Cyclon, and this is a definitive guide to the Surfcaster Penance Brand of Dissipation, which I will be league starting for the Legacy of Phrecia event. Very excited to return to Path of Exile with this event. It was a blast the first time around. I'm expecting it to be an absolute amazing time again this time. Now, it is worth stating that we are waiting still for the final patch notes with changes to the ascendancies. I'm getting this guide out now because I've been waiting for 4 days now with a finished guide, and we haven't gotten the change yet, so I'm getting the guide out now. And if there are any changes to this, I will be updating both the written guide and the PoE inside the written guide. You can find the PoE in here, and I also will be giving you daily updates once the league starts on my website, so you can find my day 1 to day 5 updates as I will be progressing with the build and adjusting to the meta and discoveries of the league. So if anything's unclear during this video or inside the guide or in the PoE, feel free to message me. I will try to answer your questions as quickly as possible. Now, I do also apologize that I don't really have any visual footage this time, and it's mostly going to be me talking. I've been playing too much PoE2. I don't have a prepped character to showcase anything on, and I don't have a Surfcaster in a private league event or from from the first time Phrecia, so I can't showcase that either. But I will be leaving a couple of links in the description of footage of other Surfcasters the first time Phrecia was out, and a couple of other things that are interesting footage to know. Alright, let's talk about a couple of reasons why Surfcaster, why Penance Brand, and what I expect Phrecia to look like. I expect that in Phrecia to be a lot of wanders. Phrecia has several ascendancies that synergize really well with wander builds, and wandering build skills were heavily buffed in the Keepers League. We had Elementalist wanders, Deadeye wanders, Necromancer wanders. We had people using Kinetic Blast, mana stacking with clustering. We had people using Kinetic Fusillade. We had people using Kinetic Rain. We had people using Kinetic Bolt. So I'm expecting a lot of wanders to go around. There is the Daughter of Oshabi, which gives +2 to maximum of Sacred Wrist, which are just additional attacks. We have the Whisperer for the mana stacking interactions. And we have the Blind Prophet, which was one of the strongest and most played ascendancies in the first Phrecia event, because of his pseudonymous with 50% chance to return and fight in random directions, and plus the projectiles while increasing the base crit. So I'm expecting there to be a lot of wander players, which means there should be a lot of wands going around, and also a lot of Spellcasters wands being created on the side, but not a lot of attention on them. So we on a Surfcaster are going to be having a field day with this. Now Surfcaster also is a very big powerhouse of an ascendancy. I'm going to be talking about a couple of notes of this in a moment. But first I want to talk about Penance Brand of Dissipation so we understand how the skill works. It allows us to understand why Surfcaster is amazing on this. I'm going to be specifically talking about a couple of things here. We have the 30% more damage with hits per energy after the first, the way it works with detached and attached, and the activation frequency, and also what I just hit is that it increase and reduction to cast speed affect the frequency. We cast Penance Brand of Dissipation. We're gonna be using Rune Binder, so we have 2, and they are gonna be sticking to an enemy, and they're gonna be stacking up that energy. Now the first pulse will deal very little damage. The next one, because we have 2 brinds, are gonna be adding 2 energies. So the enemy is gonna be keep stacking up the energy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on until we hit 20. At which point we cap out at 20 times 30. That's 600% more damage. So we're gonna be capping out at after 10 activations, because we're using 2 brands, which means we get 2 energy per activation, or we combine on those brands, capping out at 600% more damage on this. So it's going to be doing a lot of damage really quickly. Now, after 5 seconds, they're going to be detached, which resets the energy, but we can just cast 2 more brands and redo the whole damage thingy. But the activation frequency of 7.5 seconds is affected by our cast speed. So if we dual wield wands, if we have increased cast speed on our tree, ascendancy, or with frenzy charges, all this adds up, all this effective activation frequency, so the damage ramps up to max really quickly, and then we deal max damage for the remaining of those 5-second duration. So this is how Penance Brand deals a lot of damage. Penance Brand is a physical conversion skill. It takes physical damage as a basis, converts it to lightning damage. So we just need to convert 50% to have a full conversion, which means we're also physical reflect immune because we have all our physical damage converted. Now that we have all this lightning damage, we go to the Surfcaster. We have a basic lightning damage skill that is incredibly good scaling with cast speed. So we're taking a look at these two ascendancy nodes first, which would be our node 1 and 2. Actually 1 and 3, because we are only having Penance Brand later on. But in essence, we have 30% increased cast speed, which means more activation frequency, movement speed, which means we run faster, and increased damage. So Ghost of the Deep, a really powerful generic node that is incredibly synergistic with Penance Brand. Then we have Stormy Seas, which converts the lightning damage to cold damage, and allows our cold damage to shock, so we still benefit of it as if it would be lightning damage. But now, because it's cold, we can also freeze. And freeze is a massive survivability layer. Because if something is frozen, it cannot damage us. So that is really amazing. This allows us to have one of the best survivability layers aggressively in our build by just taking up Stormy Seas and Ghost of the Deep. But there are more good nodes on this. Sea Legs, which is likely the second ascendancy node we pick up, is giving us resistances, and overcapping Lightning Breath gives critical hit chance, which allows us to easier get our crit chance capped, and overcapping Cold Breath gives us evasion rating, which means we have a little bit of additional survivability, which is gonna be neat to have. And then we have Glacial Wave, which allows our cold damage, which chills enemies, to again work similar to shock. So chilled enemies have increased damage taken based on the chill effect, and have damage dealt reduced by half of our chill effect. So the chill, which is, I think it goes up to 30%, if I remember correctly, yeah, that says 30%, results in up to 30% increased damage taken, and up to 50% less damage dealt. So we now have a good ascendancy that gives us a massive damage boost, because we can shock, chill, and have insane cast speed. And then we have another option, and this is the little bit theoretical, but very, very powerful if it works. This is within the Tempest. Enemies you kill are shocked. This shock source will be this ascendancy node. And then shock I inflict spreads to other enemies. Now, the way we are working with this is we're using the Barracks Respite that is the Fallborn variant. This was introduced in the Keepers League, and we are basically, let's cut a little bit into it. Shocked enemies you kill explode. Now this explosion cannot shock, but because we're saying enemies we kill are shocked, which should be working in parallel to this, should allow us to kill an enemy. It shocks all nearby enemies. Now those nearby enemies are shocked, and then the explosion wave is traveling outwards and dealing all those killing all those enemies again, allowing them to shock nearby enemies, and allowing the explosion waves to go outward again. Combining with the Penance Brand of Dissipation explosions and the likely Oriath End Flask, which we should be able to use, this should result in a lot of screen clear by keeping a high single target damage, as we are only investing a ring slot and one ascendancy node into our clear. With this, Surfcaster is looking like an extremely powerful ascendancy for Penance Brand of Dissipation, and this is, again, going back to our original statement, why I think it's going to be really good ascendancy to start. Now, Stormy Seas is allowing us to do a huge progression skip. If we're looking at Keepers League, we see a lot of Penance Brand of Dissipation builds using double Call of the Brotherhood to convert their lightning damage to cold damage, which originally allows them to start get going. We have that built in. So all we really need to get going on Penance Brand is a Heat Shiver. We need a decent wand, but we can also use a Void Battery. It has a lot of good stats for us to use. And then we have a Heat Shiver, and we are good to go. Now we do want to dual wield, but moving around with dual wield wands feels a bit iffy. So I'm going to be using a shield early, and only going to be start doing wielding once I can spam Frostblink of Wintry Blast, which we're going to be using later on. But in essence, once we have a 5-link and a Heat Shiver and a decent weapon, we should be good to go to use Penance Brand of Dissipation. But what do we do until then? Let's quickly talk about our campaign progression. Early on, we are gonna be using Rolling Magma. Rolling Magma linked with Combustion Element Proliferation is gonna get us through Act 1 and Act 2. In Act 3, we will either need to get our Armageddon Brand and an Anger of a body that is able to buy those, or we need to do the library and do the Siosa quest to be able to buy an Armageddon Brand and an Anger of Siosa. And then we can use Cremation Armageddon Brand, which is one of the best leveling skill gem setups that we are currently know in PoE 1, which should allow us to have a really smooth progression through the campaign. The issue is, however, Cremation Armageddon Brand usually falls off in maps. However, we have an alternative of using Armor Brand with Brand Recalls. If we take a quick look at our passive tree, we see that is a really smooth progression. We start on the left side. We get 2 extremely powerful campaign masteries, which increase damage by wielding 2 different weapons. So we are wielding a dagger and a claw, so we can use whirling blades and utilize this. And then we have the fire mastery for increased damage resist against ignited enemies. We then travel over to the left side and pick up Elemental Overload. With Elemental Overload, we do a lot of damage, and we have all the damage we need for campaign, and then we can pick up Runesmith, Runebinder, and Brand Equity. At this point, we can be more of a brand build already than we are using Armor Cremation. So what we do is we drop Cremation and we just use Armor Brand, and we're utilizing Brand Recall. Now, again, I don't have any footage of this on my own, but this is John Ground's video from a year ago where he utilized it on a Saboteur with Armageddon Brand Recall to do clearing. So this is going to be working really well for our early Atlas progression. The way this works in a very compact way is not using a unique weapon, but if you have a rare weapon, you can craft the trigger socketed skills every 8 seconds on it. This triggers Brand Recall every 8 seconds. It also applies our Essence Mark and our Curse. And then we use a Brand Recall with an automation support, which is a 4-second Brand Recall. And these two should work in parallel to each other. So we have every 4 seconds a Brand Recall and every 8 seconds a Brand Recall, which then recalls all armor brands to us and deals a big explosion, which will just deal a lot of flat damage. We are at that point not really a dot build anymore, but just a big on-hit damage build. Should allow us a smooth progression through the early maps, allow us to get a little bit of early currency, and then once we have a Heat Shiver and have a decent wand, or let's say a Void Battery, we are good to go for Penance Brand, and at that point Penance Brand will carry us through the rest of the game. And that really is the whole idea of the build. Now I will talk about a couple of endgame interactions that are really good for the build before we're gonna be finishing this video out. In the endgame, I have here an example endgame build, example endgame gear. This is gonna be semi-expensive. We are using a couple of higher expensive items. It's a big swap from the Penance Brand of Dissipation swap to here, but we're just gonna be working on an item per item basis. Once we have decent wands, we swap out of the power of the Void Battery, and we're gonna be using +2 wands with either some crit multi or cast speed, and then we are gonna be getting multi-modding with the other, and we're getting damage of non-chaos damage is extra chaos damage. Also be getting this on a Theory's Promise. The way this works, and I quickly want to explain this, conversion in PoE 1 is a bit interesting. So we have Fizz, Light, Cold, Fire, Chaos. If we're getting conversion, it only goes in this direction. So if we are converting physical to lightning, lightning cold, then we are converting cold to fire or fire to chaos. However, we are not doing the last 2 steps in this build, so I'm not going to go into this. We then have non-chaos damage as extra chaos. So the way this works is our physical damage is taken. We now have all our physical damage, all increased physical damage is applied, all increased spell damage is applied, and then this fist damage, we take a portion of that, add it as chaos damage. Then we convert it to lightning damage, because the build skill has a built-in lightning conversion, and on our gloves or on our passive tree, we are converting the rest. Now our lightning damage, we take a little bit of that, add it as chaos damage after it's calculated, and then we convert it to cold. We again take a little bit of that, add it as chaos damage, and now we have a big chunk of cold damage and a decent chunk of chaos damage. So with this, we now have conversion as an actually good scaling mechanic, because it's not just, oh, it's 4%. No, because it's 4% of physical, plus 4% of cold, plus 4% of lightning, which is 12% of our damage, instead of just 4%, which is suddenly 3 times as much. Now if we add this is already 24%. Then we also have 8% with that series promise if max rolled, but it's gonna be another 60 to 24 depending if the physical is also max rolled. So this is already half of our damage added as chaos damage, which is a big chunk. And then we have leech chaos damage, leech a portion of our chaos damage to life, giving us also a recoverability layer. So damage non-chaos as extra chaos is gonna be really powerful for our build. We then can use an Oriath End, which is a Bismuth flask, so it gives us resistances, which, going back to Surfcaster, helps with the overcapping of critical, giving us a little bit of crit bonus. So this flask, in essence, gives us resistances, critical strike hit chance, a little bit of evasion rating, and explosion, making it a really best in slot flask for this build. And then we can utilize Relic of Patience with a Militant Face. Now, the way that works is Militant Face in this spot here will provide Hexmaster with Inner Conviction, which gives us more spell damage per power charge. So you can see here this jewel, and this notable, so it's a 1 point, I guess it's a 3-pointer, for 15% more damage. But we gain power charges instead of frenzy charges. If we are looking here at the boots, these boots are Relic of Patience. They're giving us number of counting as having the maximum number of frenzy charges. Now, if I remove these boots, you can see I'm losing quite a bit of damage. This is again because we are utilizing cast speed. So this one says we cannot gain frenzy charges, but the boot says we count as max number of frenzy charges. And if we are looking what frenzy charges do, they are 4% increased cast speed for frenzy charge, so that is another 12% cast speed and 12% more damage. So the boots give us a huge chunk to our damage and to our cast speed, making it a really good boots to use on the build. Another very powerful interaction on this build is using a Shaper influenced helmet, and I'm going back to PoE for that. Normally we would have a 6-link in our body armor, but we can instead use a 4-link in our helmet and use a Shaper influenced helmet. Now, early on, any base is fine. Later on, there should be an Archdemon Crown, as it gives +2 to the level of our Penance Brand, which is a huge boost to our damage. Now, the good thing about Penance Brand is basically any corrupted implicit can be made work. So there is 3 variations to this. There's Socketed Gems, gain 50% physical damage as for lightning. Socketed Gems deal 30% more damage on low life. Socketed Gems deal 30% more elemental damage. Those are from the corrupted essences, and we can use those all because Penance Brands can utilize them all. If we use the low life, we would also just be picking up Pain Attunement and we deal more damage. Otherwise, we will just be using any of the other 2. And then if we do this on a Shaper base, we can get base crit chance, which doesn't increase the mana cost, and supported by Hypothermia, which will increase the mana cost. And then as a prefix, we can get Socketed AoE gems plus 2 levels. So then suddenly we have a basic 4-link helmet just on its own, because 50% damage extra lightning or 30% more damage is as good as a support gem. +2 is almost as good as a level 3 in power. Base crit is better than increased critical strike support. And Hypothermia is giving us more damage against chilled enemies, which all our damage is cold, so that's good. Making this helmet give us a whopping 50% damage increase. So if we are just looking at what we gain here, actually it's better. If we are removing it, it takes 50%, but if we're gaining it, it doubles our damage. So it's a very powerful helmet, but of course it without really increasing the cost. Later on, again, we can do an Archdemon Crown, and we can go even a step further and get concentrated effect supported by as well. And then we get just another big boost to our damage. Overall, this should result in a very powerful helmet for very powerful damage, and it leaves us having the 6th link, the body armor, which we can then use for auras, which just allows us to fit a little bit more auras in for again a little bit more damage. Lastly, we do have a balance of terror plan in this build. We only really care about the gain physical damage as a random element if you cast elemental weakness in the past 10 seconds. If it's lightning damage, the lightning damage gets converted to cold damage. If it's cold or fire damage, we just have that. So it's just gonna be additional damage, which is gonna be really great for our build. And all we need to do is cast elemental weakness every couple seconds, every 4 seconds manually, and we're gonna be fine. So yeah, that is the plans for my Leaguestarter. The video has been long enough. If you got any questions or anything is unclear, feel free to reach out in the comment section on Discord or during a live stream on launch. I will try to be there for that. All this being said, have a lovely day, and I'll be seeing you in my next video or live stream. Goodbye.